Hello. Thank you for joining me around the virtual campfire today. This is one of my favorite places to be. Sitting around a campfire on a beautiful Adirondack evening. I was going to say summer, but I've done it in the winter too, with some good friends. So today, this is an addition to the podcast that I talked about last week on nonverbal communication. And it's a shout out. It's kind of a in memoriam for some of these men, but it's just showing some gratitude for men I have known throughout my life, who I would call men of distinction, that have taught me so much about communication. Before I share some of those men with you, I've been thinking and reflecting just about nonverbal communication in general, somewhat as it relates to genders. So I used to think when I was a counselor, I actually would talk about this in groups that women used more verbal communication than men in any course of the day. Doesn't matter the age they were at throughout their lifetime, that women use words more than men use words to communicate. And if you're shaking your head right now and going, yes, well, Brian, that makes sense. It does. And when I was getting ready to do this podcast about men of distinction, I went to make sure there was some evidence to back that up. And the evidence that I found now in 2026 does not support that. It actually says that men and women in the reports and in all of the uh, kind of research they've done, it's about equal. So this may be more of a personality thing, which I find interesting. It may be more environmentally. It may be the people who raised you, how you communicate with words versus your nonverbal communication. It's just an interesting fact. For me, for whatever reason, most of the men, and I'm going to focus on men today because for me as a man, I had difficulty with male relationships for a long, long time. And actually getting into recovery and meeting men who didn't fit the stereotypical men that I grew up with, who didn't share their feelings, who didn't talk about anything but sports and cars and women or sex. That was the stereotypical man that I thought of or was around until I got into recovery, and then there were some deeper relationships. So, thinking about this, kicking this around over the last week as we talked about nonverbal communication, these names and people started coming up in my life, and they all have some similarities, but they all have differences. And I've got a little slideshow of some of the men that I want to show you now. But I can say for every single man of distinction I'm about to talk about, they were all humble, and they taught me that. They were all soft spoken. They didn't come in, hey, yeah, take over a room, have that kind of vibe. They didn't travel with a posse of people. They usually had a few friends. They were very concise when they talked, and they also just seemed to be very grounded. And for me, I guess that means they just seemed like they were comfortable in their own skin. Another reason that I wanted to add this podcast to the list is that some of these men that I admired, and I could say, some of these men that I loved have passed away. And for some of them, it was fairly recently. So the first men that I want to just share with you, tell you a little bit about, are the men who have passed away, and I will miss them. And I have kind of put this in chronological order, starting from the most recent men I've known who passed away and then going back in my lifetime. So the first, this is my friend Rick. And Rick was my age. He passed away just a couple months ago. He was the first friend I ever had, and he lived across the street from me when I grew up. So we got into some trouble, like little kid trouble, like playing matchboxes in anthills, getting stung by bees, taking our bikes off ramps that had to do with two by fours and pieces of plywood we stole from the garage, propped up on cinder blocks and crashing. There were no helmets or pads back then. And then Rick moved away to California. So he was my first friend, and he was also the first kind of grief I had over a friend moving away. And then he moved back in high school, and we knew each other. We weren't as close in high school because the time had passed, but we always stayed in touch. And when you talk about humility, Rick was a truly, truly humble dude. He is probably the only person I know who, right after high school, jumped into a job, jumped into a career, and had just retired months before he passed away. He had been diagnosed with an illness a year before that, and uh, he's not with us anymore. And I will miss you, brother. This is Brian McCabe. This is my mentor, Mr. McCabe, I want to say, because I would not be doing the work I'm doing if it was not for Brian. I took his class when I went back to school to become a substance use disorder counselor, and I learned lots of McCabeisms. He used to put his fingers up and say, Brian, people may listen to what you say when it comes to addiction, but unless they've had enough pain, they probably won't change. And at first I thought he was full of it because, of course, I was going to get people to change, but he was absolutely right. Oh, there's my doggies. Hopefully, my puppies have made the perimeter safe. I mentioned in the last video we just got our third dog, McLovin, and she's getting used to it. But the other dogs are certainly telling her who they should bark at. So back to Mr. McCabe. He was someone who really built on my skills and always, always, always built up my self-confidence. He told me when I retire from being a professor, I want you to take over my job. And I thought he was just blowing smoke. But he did call me. I had gone back to school and got my master's degree in teaching. And I ended up taking over Mr. McCabe's job at the college and teaching up and coming counselors. So he is certainly not only a man of distinction or a mentor, he is someone that I owe my career to. And he passed away just within these last few weeks. I went to his service. So again, much love, and I'm going to miss you, Mr. McCabe. This is Mr. Grip, Frank Grip. Frank Grip was a high school shop teacher. I was brought up with very few skills about how to fix things. My father just didn't have the patience. He would try to fix things, but he didn't have the patience to do it. I started working with Mr. Grip during the summers in high school, and he taught me not only how to get jobs done, but how to get them done effectively. This was before the days of the internet, so I couldn't just Google and look up how to spackle a wall, how to put a metal roof on, how to do any of those things. But Mr. Grip had the patience to teach me those things. And he taught his whole crew, which were also other high school boys, how to do stuff. And it really gave me an appreciation for doing a job right, for doing a job with patience, and for ending the job at the end of the day. I still have to remember these things because I'll sometimes just want to get it done and push, push, push. But my best work is never done after 8 to 10 hours of trying to get something to work. So Mr. Grip was a great guy. He had an infectious laugh. He was very patient with me and with all of the people that worked for him. And I owe all of my do-it-yourself skills and confidence to him. He too passed away within the last year, and that was a loss. He was one in a million. This was my father. So my father, Bob, was, as I've said, not the best at getting things fixed, but he was the best dad I could have asked for. He was a man of very few words. He certainly was humble. He was funny. He was sarcastic. That's where I get much of that from. And he was an excellent caretaker to everyone around him. He is seen here in the business that he took over from his father, which was a bait and tackle shop. And you can't tell from here, but in the background, those are cigarettes that my grandfather used to sell. My father was able to stop smoking, and he also stopped selling cigarettes in that store, which was really impressive to me. He could have made a lot of money on that, but he did not agree. He was a man of great convictions, and he did not agree with selling addiction or selling the harm that comes from cigarettes, so he stopped doing it. He told me once that some people take a very long time to tell a very short story. And I guess that goes along with being concise in your communication. So my father passed away in 1996 at the age I am now, 55, as a result of a car accident. And it was way before his time. I was 26 at that time, and that was when I got sober. I kind of knew I was going to have to grow up and fill some very big shoes. So I would say I miss my father dearly, which I do. He never got to see my kids, never got to see me or my sister get married, any of his grandkids. But he does visit me right outside the window as a cardinal, and I feel his presence all the time. Those are the men of distinction that have passed on from my life. And as I thought about this a little bit more, I thought there are people that are still alive that I really look up to. So better to honor them now while they're still alive. And I want to tell you about a few of those men as well. And here I went chronologically in terms of the men I've known from early on. Rick was my very first friend, but this was my second. This is my friend Greg, affectionately known as Uncle Ernie. I won't get into all of the stories and background behind that, but we have been friends since elementary school. He lives out in the mountains of Colorado right now, but we still keep in touch by text and funny emails, and he comes back to visit every now and then. Greg is another person who has a dark, sarcastic, hilarious sense of humor. He's like a brother to me. He's always been an extremely humble person, and he is one of the very few people who, when I stopped drinking, we still remained friends. And he also was really cool about getting over me being a horrible friend in person when I was drinking. It's hard to be friends with an active alcoholic or someone that's caught in a substance use disorder. And Greg, very forgiving, very loving person, although he wouldn't ever say that about himself. This is Uncle Andy. This is my brother-in-law. So I met him before I married my wife. He married my wife's sister, but we met in college. And Uncle Andy is a really stand-up guy, very, I don't even want to say soft-spoken, but not someone to rush out into the spotlight, does not need to hear his own voice, does not need to have a crowd following him at any time. And even though we live in the age of the internet, this guy can fix anything around the house. And he usually is. He's always ready with his tool belt to go around and fix things. He has been an awesome father to his kids, which I admire. And I always enjoy when Uncle Andy and I get together. Glad he's part of my life, even though he's a Jets fan. This is my first boss, Tom, and Tom was an excellent boss. I probably wouldn't have stayed in the field if he hadn't been the kind of person who would say, "When's your next vacation coming?" as soon as I got back from my last vacation. He also, I don't know if this was a rule in the outpatient substance use disorder clinic that he hired me at. I should also mention I was an intern there. I was the very first intern that Tom let into that building, and then he hired me, and I stayed with that company for 20 something years. I continued to work for them part-time, even when I was a professor at the college, running groups and doing things like that. And it was all because of Tom's mentorship. He would say to us at lunchtime, and again, I don't know if this was a written rule or not, but we never talked about work. We always talked about family. We always talked about things outside of work. And I haven't had that in a job since working for Tom. He's a great guy, and he always had the backs of his employees, which meant he often had to go to our aid or defense with the higher ups. And I respected him for that a great deal. He told it like it was, and you always knew that what he told you was true. There was never a dishonest kind of thing that he would tell you he was going to do if he didn't mean he was going to do it. So much love to Tom as well. This is my friend Jim. And Jim is someone I've met who got me out of the idea that lawyers were all people that just wanted to rip you off, because Jim certainly was not that. Jim is a man of high moral ethics and great father, has taught me a lot about that. He has taught me a lot about the path of recovery, being a good guy. He owns a fishing boat, and every week in the summer, he has fishing charters. I own my own boat now, so I don't go out with him all the time for that. And you talk about, I mentioned a laugh before. He has a cackle, which you can hear probably a half a mile away. So you hear Jim before you see Jim, but a dear friend of mine, and so glad he's in my life. This is my friend Ken Provo, and I met Ken when we started a organization called Recovery Advocacy in Saratoga. And Ken had lost his son at that time. He's open about it, so I don't mind sharing his story. His son died from an overdose, and Ken found him after that. So Ken committed to going into schools with me and telling that story to kids, middle schoolers and high schoolers, in the hopes it wouldn't happen to them. And every time, Ken is, of all the men that I have had up here, he is the most concise. He is the least likely to kind of walk up and speak. He's gotten I don't even want to say better at it. He's just put himself in situations where he does it more. But when he spoke at a school, you could hear a pin drop because it was so authentic and it was so real. And I make sure to hug him every time I see him because I know he still doesn't like it. That is my friend Ken. So I got a little out of order here, but this is my father-in-law. This is Kevin, Kevin Kellett. And I met Kevin when I met my wife, which was back in 1999. And my wife and I, girlfriend at that point, were on an exchange program in England for the year. And she told me her parents were coming over, and her father was a detective from Long Island. And I was afraid. And then I met Kevin and realized he was not at all the stereotypical police officer that I had in my mind. I haven't had any relatives that are police officers, so I didn't really know what to expect, except that it probably meant trouble, especially because I was dating the police officer's daughter. Kevin was not only cool and humble and soft-spoken, but he was a lot of fun. And I met his daughter in 1990. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was when we were on the exchange program. And we married in 1999. And I quit drinking in 1996. So it was a tumultuous relationship. And one of the best conversations of my life that I'll never forget is when Kevin and I, before I married Suzanne, but we were engaged, we went fishing on my boat and we had a long talk, and he kind of forgave me. I was able to make an amends, which is a living amends, for just like I mentioned with my friend Greg, being a pretty tough person to be around and to love and to trust. And as a father, I would certainly want to trust whoever my kids wound up with as life partners. So much love for Kevin. He has shown me what being a good father and person and friend is, and also how to have some fun and enjoy music. Oh my gosh, this guy loves music. I believe those are all the pictures of men I wanted to show you, but I want to share a few more just names. These are men in my life who I know through recovery programs. So I have pictures of them, but I know they are somewhat anonymous about their recovery, which to me all goes back to humility too. I do believe in talking about my recovery because I think it helps other people, but I always hope in doing that that it's not a source of pride or a flex, like, look at what I've done, because I believe my recovery day by day has been given to me, and and it's because I keep learning and sitting around campfires and at meetings with people who are wiser and more humble and more grounded than me. So in March, I'm going to go to a 12-step men's retreat. I try to get there at least once a year. This year, I'm hoping to get there twice a year. I've been going there for over 20 years, and some of these men I only see at that men's retreat. And we will definitely be sitting around a fire, and we will be talking about some real stuff. And the men that have walked with me on that path are Steve. Steve was there at the first men's retreat I went to, and he continues to be there every year. And I love the guy. I love talking with him. A picture of humility. Does a lot of work with other members of recovery. Brian, my Moxie loving friend, who Not only do we share the same name, we kind of share the same heart. He is definitely a hugger, and he is someone that is just so authentic and often doesn't give himself enough credit. But I've learned from him that we grow in those places where we admit that we are broken. Ian is, whew, I guess I'm considered an old timer now, but Ian is a super duper old timer. And at every men's meeting he goes to, he plays the guitar and we finish it up with Amazing Grace. And every time I feel that, I get choked up. You know, Amazing Grace means so much more to me now after being around these men and living this wonderful life than it meant before I had this, because it is a gift. And then I have a dear friend, Chris, who is full of, I guess in his terms, it might be piss and vinegar in the best possible way. He walks the walk and talks the talk, and he and I can certainly fuss and bother and spit about the state of the world and then go out and do something about it, whatever we can in whatever small way. And the last man of distinction that I love seeing when we go on these men's weekends is Tom. Tom can fix anything. He has been an awesome father. He's now a grandfather, which I'm quite jealous of. And he's another person who, after going to these meetings for some time, kind of let us know, even though we have a good time, we kid around a lot, he let us know things that where he was struggling with and, you know, his imperfections. And I need that. I need people who don't, especially men, who don't feel like they have to say things are perfect and fine all the time. And Tom is certainly that. So, love to all the boys. We call ourselves the Wayward Boys. We've been to several different retreat centers over these 20 something years, even during COVID. We got together virtually during that time, and wherever the retreat moves to, I will follow them. Like I said, sometimes I only see them at the retreats, but they are still dear members of my life and certainly my recovery. And then other members of recovery a little closer to home. Bob, Boston Bob or Bob B, has been intricate to my recovery. He hosts a camping weekend every October, and he's done that for probably going on a couple decades now, too. He is a man who wears his heart on his sleeve. He taught me how to be okay with showing emotion and being a loving man. I think that's awesome. Mark, he's got the Mark accent. And Mark is who I go to when I want to know anything that's going on in the 12-step community. He goes to Founders Day. If you didn't know, AA started 90 years ago. I think 1935 was the official date, so going on 91 years. And Mark always tells us when anything is going on AA related, you can go all over the country and find people in recovery. And I mentioned I still go to meetings. The one I go to every week is one where we just read the Alcoholics Anonymous book. The first 164 pages are really how the program works. And Mark is always there, and we read it over and over and over again because I need to hear that. Andrew is a great friend of mine, a man of distinction who's gone through some kind of losses I can't even imagine. I mentioned my Ken Provo had lost his son. Andrew, too, lost a son because his son had health issues at a pretty young age. And he still grieves. And he talks about that grief and he shows that side of himself. And I love getting him out on the boat to go fishing. And we have a really, really good discussions. And then the last man of distinction on my list is someone I've known since high school, and that's Scott. And Scott was the first person I knew who even was considering recovery. And I don't think it was his choice. I don't know. He was the first person in school that was like, "Oh, do you know he went for treatment or he went for this or that." And even back then in high school, I thought, geez, that might be something I need later on. And I did. And so Scott and I share a lot in common. We came from the same place, which means we know the good part of that place and we also know the challenges of that place. And I enjoy getting together with Scott. We spend some time on the river and around some campfires as well. So those are my men of distinction. And like I said, I started thinking about this because my experience has been with men in my life, the it's not what they say, it's not even how they say it. It's just the presence that men have. All of these men that I have mentioned that I need and I respect. So I hope you'll take all of this and you'll think about the people in your life that you want to honor and you want to thank. And in some small way, you'll do that. Coming up next week, to get back into our 52 weeks of communicating responsibly, we're going to be talking about empathy. And these men all, they probably wouldn't call it empathy or compassion. Sometimes, sometimes, honestly, it comes across as ball busting with each other. That's a non-clinical term, but always done with love and care and not taking ourselves too seriously. You're going to want to tune in, I hope, and hear more about empathy. I'll get that out next week. But thank you for sitting around the campfire with me and hearing about some of the men of distinction in my life. Take care.